Welcome back to New Africa Farming. Imagine this: millions of banana stems buried beneath the scorching sands of the Sahel. We are not talking about bananas grown for food. We are not talking about planting tropical farms in the middle of the desert. We are talking about massive amounts of soft, wet banana biomass, cut down, transported across hundreds of miles, and buried deep under one of the driest, most unforgiving landscapes in Africa. At first glance, it sounds completely absurd. Why would anyone take tons of tropical agricultural waste, spend money and fuel to move it, and just push it into the edge of the desert? But what if those buried stems could hold moisture for months? What if they could feed an entire microscopic ecosystem, soften dead ground, and help the land retain water long after the rain has stopped falling? And what if, behind this incredibly strange idea, stood a much larger vision? A strategy tied to the revolutionary mindset of Captain Ibrahim Traoré, questioning whether the Sahel can finally be taught to stop losing life as quickly as it loses water. Today, we're diving deep into one of the most fascinating ecological concepts of our time. This is the story of biological infrastructure. To understand why an idea like this belongs to science and not fantasy, you first have to understand what the Sahel actually lacks. From the outside looking in, the world imagines the Sahel as a place of endless dryness, a cursed borderland where the desert simply keeps marching south. But that is the first major misunderstanding. The Sahel does receive rain. It is not always even, and it is certainly not always reliable, but the rain does arrive. Violent storms can hit hard. For a few short days, the low ground darkens with moisture, and the land looks almost alive again. But then, the tragic pattern repeats. Because the soil has been degraded for decades, it has formed a hard, impenetrable crust. The water simply runs off the surface. The brutal heat rises, the ground bakes, and whatever fragile life began to organize around that brief moisture instantly collapses. The Sahel does not always fail because water never comes. It fails because water never stays. When water does not stay, soil life weakens. Roots struggle to penetrate the concrete-like dirt. The heat reaches further underground, erasing any opportunity for survival. That is why true restoration is not about trying to create more rain. It's about solving an invisible problem. How do we keep moisture underground just a little bit longer? This is exactly where the banana stem begins to sound less like a crazy idea and more like pure genius. Why banana stems? The answer is hidden in their anatomy. A banana tree does not have a woody trunk like an oak or pine tree. It's a giant herb. It's mostly composed of soft plant tissue packed tightly with moisture, fiber, and organic material. Cut a fresh banana stem open, and you'll see that it behaves exactly like a living sponge. In a harsh, dry land, anything that acts like a sponge is more valuable than gold. If you leave a banana stem exposed on the surface of the desert, the sun will destroy its value in days. The wind will dry it out, the heat will shrink it, and all its precious water will evaporate back into the atmosphere. But when you bury it, the entire logic of the desert changes. Underground, the stems are protected from the lethal UV rays and the drying winds. They become temporary moisture banks. They hold on to water for far longer than the bare sand ever could. But they don't just act as water reservoirs. As they sit in the dark, damp earth, they begin to break down. In the Sahel, decay is not a sign of death. Decay is the ultimate form of restoration. As the banana biomass decomposes, it leaves behind something incredibly precious: carbon and organic matter. It feeds billions of microorganisms. Bacteria and beneficial fungi begin to thrive. Small insects return. This biological explosion turns the dead, pale sand into a darker, softer, and richer zone of living soil.
This means the next time it rains, the water doesn't just run off, it gets absorbed into this newly created spongy layer. Roots from hardy grasses and drought-resistant crops can finally push deep into the earth, finding the hidden moisture they need to survive the brutal dry season. However, nobody is suggesting that we just randomly dump millions of stems out of an airplane. For this to work, it cannot be random waste disposal. It must be systematic underground design. The stems must be carefully placed where moisture naturally gathers, in deep trenches, in shallow planting pits known as zai holes, or in strategic bands running underneath future crop rows. When you organize organic waste in this manner, it stops being agricultural trash. It becomes biological infrastructure. We are used to thinking of infrastructure as concrete dams, steel pipelines, and asphalt roads, but in the fight against desertification, the most powerful infrastructure is biological, distributed, and completely hidden beneath the soil. But the moment this idea starts sounding like the perfect solution, a massive reality check appears. Where do all these banana stems come from? At a small scale, burying biomass is just a smart farming technique, but at a national scale, it becomes a monstrous supply chain problem. To bury millions of stems, someone has to harvest them from the tropical, humid zones of the south. They must be cut, loaded onto fleets of trucks, and driven hundreds of miles north to the desert edge before they rot or dry out. Banana stems are incredibly heavy because they are full of water. Moving water is expensive. This is where ecology crashes into logistics. If a government under a visionary like Ibrahim Traoré were to execute this, it would require military-level coordination. It would test whether an African nation can treat organic waste not as garbage, but as a strategic national resource. And if they succeed, if the supply chain works and the trenches are filled, then ecology quickly turns into geopolitics. In a region where fertile land is disappearing, any project that helps dead ground hold value becomes a question of supreme power. A restored corridor of land doesn't just change the soil, it changes human behavior. It dictates where people can safely plant their seeds. It dictates where villages will stay instead of migrating. A protected green zone attracts labor. Labor attracts trade, and trade creates economic sovereignty. Whoever controls the restoration of the land controls the future of the nation. This is the hidden danger and the hidden promise of the Sahel. The temptation will always be to rush, to bury more stems, dig more trenches, and expand as fast as possible for the cameras. But fragile landscapes do not reward impatience. If you expand too fast without proper management, the desert will simply swallow your efforts, turning millions of hours of labor into dust. Success in the Sahel is not measured by a single dramatic green season. It is measured by discipline. It is measured by the patience to let one patch of soil heal before moving to the next. Ultimately, the idea of burying tropical bananas in the Sahara edge may seem like a wild thought experiment, but it forces us to ask the most critical question in African agriculture today. What does a dry land really need to survive? It needs more than just rain. It needs the capacity to hold on to that rain. It needs the gap between one storm and the next to be a little less empty, a little less brutal. The most important thing buried in those trenches is not banana biomass, it is time. Time for moisture to linger, time for microscopic life to organize, time for roots to dive deep into the dark earth, and time for the land to remember, after decades of suffering, exactly how to live again. Whether this specific method is deployed tomorrow or remains a visionary concept of what is possible, it represents the exact kind of revolutionary, self-reliant thinking that Africa needs. We cannot wait for the world to save the environment. Africa must engineer its own salvation from the ground up. What do you think of this radical approach to biological infrastructure? Could transforming agricultural waste into underground water banks be the ultimate weapon against desertification? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you believe in a greener, stronger, and fully sovereign Africa, make sure to hit that like button, share this video, and subscribe to New Africa Farming. We will continue to bring you the most powerful agricultural stories shaping the future of our continent. Thank you for watching, and God bless Africa.